everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney, and today we have the final part 3 of the new look, oh my gosh, 6217, I just forgot the number, pattern, the pencil skirt that we have been doing, the couture pencil skirt that we've been doing. And you guys have been really loving this sew along. I'm so glad. I hope that my, again, this is not a true couture pencil skirt, but it does have a lot of couture techniques in it. So I am not a couture seamstress, but it is fun to play around with couture. I've taken quite a few classes, both in person and online, so I'm glad I was able to maybe teach a few people new things, or even just take a time to make a small project that will last forever, because it really is the techniques that help with longevity in a garment. Anyway, today we are attaching the skirt, the lining and the skirt together at the waistband, which gets a little confusing. I'm gonna try and edit it so it's not as choppy, but I'm sewing this literally like on the fly. Like as I'm sewing it is the first time, like you're literally seeing me first time round. Like I didn't do any practice runs. My channel is very raw. It is very, I do not edit out really anything. Maybe just the pauses, you know, like while I'm waiting, you know, that's pretty much it. The dead space, you know, if I'm walking back to the camera or whatever. Most of what you see is just first take. I very rarely chop things together. However, I do feel like it did get kind of confusing because I was going back and forth. So I'm going to try and edit that so that you're not having to sit there watching me figure out, you know, wrap my brain around the best way to finish off the lining when we're putting in the Petersham and all that. But anyway, then you're just getting the end result. So anyway, well, hopefully that's not too confusing, but feel free to ask questions if you've got any, because we're putting in the Petersham waistband and basically finishing everything off. So the skirt is completely enclosed in the lining. A lot of hand sewing, but it's actually really therapeutic. I did all of mine actually standing at my cutting table, which I think is a fantastic practice because as seamstresses, we sit a lot. My husband just got an Apple Watch for Christmas, and it tracks how many minutes he stands during the day. And one of the suggested, he has like an app or whatever that goes with it, is that for every hour you're sitting, you should get up and stand for at least a minute, because he works in an office, so he sits a lot too. So I did all of my hand sewing standing at my table because my table hits waist high, so it's a good ergonomic height for me, because again, my back is still all messed up at the moment. My poor body is having a hard time right now, but anyway. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this one. For next week, we're going to have a little bit, we'll have a breather video in there, and someone suggested something, asked if I would do something, and I even commented, and I said, oh yeah, I usually do a breather video between sew-alongs, and that would be a perfect one to do on Sundays, and I've completely forgotten. I didn't write it down. Again, I had a medical procedure yesterday, and so my brain was all 100 different directions, just with trying to get things all figured out with that. And I didn't write it down, and I forgot. So if you are that person and you suggested something and I commented and said, yeah, that'd be a great video to do in between sew-alongs, let me know. So there will be something next week, and then after that we're gonna dig into the Huxley bag, which is the backpack purse, or it can be a backpack, it can hang on a bike or whatever, by Goheen Designs. And I do have a coupon code for that pattern right now for the Great Module Sew Along. I'll leave it's Tomcat is the coupon code to get 20% off that pattern. She also sells kits for that pattern on her website. I believe the 20% off is only good for the pattern, but if you are interested in just getting the hardware kit, it's pretty reasonably priced. So anyway, we'll be doing that 2 weeks from today. We will start that sew along. Okay, I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday. Wait till the end and I will do my twirls in my new couture skirt, and spoiler, I really love it. Okay, hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday, and I'll see you on Tuesday. Bye! Alright, so here's what you guys should have. You should have the shell of your skirt and the lining of your skirt. Still separate. I have catch stitched, if you can see, catch stitched my hem in place, and also my vent. I have stopped catch stitching though here. I have not sewn this down yet because when we attach our lining with hand stitches, you're going to want to fold that little raw corner under just so you don't have any raw edges poking out, and the same on the other side. If you've gone all the way to the edge, you can just, you know, take a couple of those stitches out because you really just need to be able to fold under like that, but we'll get to that point. I have, oops, side, shortened my zipper. So all I did, I'm going to explain the fraying here in a second too. All I did was I took some thread and just sewed a new zipper stop, basically. Just went round and round and round and round, knotted it off, and then cut off the excess. I still have all the excess at the top. That'll get cut off once we sew the lining in. My lining has been, it's inside out right now, but it's been completely constructed. And then on the side, you know, I've got it open for the slit, and also up here, well, there we go, for the zipper. So, we are ready to insert our lining into our skirt. All right, first things first, we're going to attach our lining to the skirt at the waist. And so I'm going to take you over to the sewing machine, and we're going to, you know, show you, this is the only line of basting that should be in now, is up here at the top of the waist. So we are going to attach those, remove that basting, and then insert our Petersham waist basting. So let's go to the sewing machine. Okay. Someone laughed at the headless Whitney comment that I made. It's like that ghost on the Harry Potter movies, the nearly headless neck. Like, that's kind of what I like. But the important thing is that you guys are seeing what we're doing here. Okay, so what we're going to do is I have my skirt inside out, and I'm going to turn my lining right side out. This is always the moment of truth. Sometimes I put the slit like on the wrong side of the lining because it's like counterintuitive. So if you've done that, that's what a seam ripper's for. I'm good though. Okay, so I'm going to slide my lining over my skirt. And so the wrong side of my lining is to the wrong side of my skirt. And basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to unzip my zipper. It just needs to be out of the way of the seam, so you don't need to unzip it too far. In fact, I think it's a little bit easier if you don't unzip it too far. Hold on. Oh, I was going to explain to you why the edges are raw too, because I had a lot of questions about that as I'm like zipping and unzipping things. This will be much better once all of the raw edges are encased into the... Alright, so you're going to want to unzip your zipper. Not all the way, just a little bit, just enough to where you can easily sew the waist seam. Our lining should have all of your sewing lines marked on it, and those are going to become invaluable here in just a minute. So I've got my lining over my skirt, wrong side of lining to the wrong side of the skirt. I have my zipper in place. I've unzipped it just a little bit just so I don't accidentally hit the pole when I'm sewing. My zipper is turned back like you would wear it, and we're going to leave it that way because we're going to hand sew the lining to the zipper here after a little bit. But basically your intersection, you're not going to be able to see this because of the nature of the silk, but there you've marked your stitching line. So that corner where the seam line and the side seam meet there, you're just going to line that up right inside your zipper tape. Technically that's going to be right on that intersection, but we're not going to worry about that now because we are going to tuck a little bit more than the seam allowance, or a little bit more than the stitching line under when we're fixing this to the zipper, you know, when we fold it under and sew it to the zipper, just so we have ease of zipping it open and closed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin, you know, I've got my basted line on my skirt still here at the waistline, and I've got my marked waistline on the lining. So I'm going to pin these two together, again, wrong side of lining to wrong side of skirt, all across the seam line, and I'm going to leave, you know, the skirt will extend past the, or the lining will extend past the skirt here, past the zipper, because we will tuck that in and sew that in by hand in a little bit. So yeah, I'm just going to go around and pin the waist seam. And you're going to want to match your seam lines, obviously your side seam lines, and your darts. And your darts should be going in opposite directions because that's the way we pressed them. Okay, so I'm gonna show you, I have literally pin basted all the way, sorry, this fabric's gonna make it a little hard to see. Can you see my pins? All the way around, and I've matched up the wax line on my lining, so you'll see the rajas do not match up, and that's fine because I'm gonna follow my basting line. Now at this point, you can totally go with a needle and thread and baste these two layers together if you'd like. I'm not going to. I think the pin basting is enough. You are gonna have excess past the zipper, and that's fine. It might be different for both sides because we just did a rough cut of those seam allowances, so we are literally just following our sewing lines, which is fine. So I'm just gonna sew those, and I'm going to start not at the edge. Well, yes, I am going to start at the edge. So I'm going to start right at the zipper, and I'm going to sew carefully over that zipper, and I'm just going to follow my pin basting line all the way around the skirt, and then we're going to trim our zipper, and we're actually going to serge. Now, I've had a lot of questions about why I have not serged any of my raw seams. This is a couture-ish skirt, so I'm using some couture techniques. It is not completely couture. In couture, they do not serge anything. Nothing is finished. Now the seams will be catch stitched to the underlining all the way, which keeps the seams flat, but because it keeps the seams flat, it also helps to keep things from unraveling because you don't have the friction of it moving around in there. But the reason they don't finish the seams is because of bulk. They want everything as smooth as possible in there. And that's another reason why we cut the bigger seam allowances, so if there is some fraying, it's not the end of the world. So that is why. That is the explanation as to why. Again, if you were, you wouldn't want to make like a workout outfit with well, workout would be knit, so it really wouldn't matter. But, you wouldn't want to make a dress that you're washing and wearing a ton and not finish the seam allowances, especially something that you were going to be washing in the wash because that would fray completely away. But this will be dry clean only. And again, I don't sew couture very often, so this is just some of the tips and techniques I've picked up along the way. But yeah, I just decided to follow those rules. So you don't want to be able to see that serged line through on the right side of the fabric. And again, this is a brocade. You probably wouldn't really. But yeah, just keeping to the nature of the couture techniques. All right, but that being said, we're actually going to serge the waistband, the waist, because when we insert the Petersham ribbon, well, you'll see it here in a little bit. Okay, let's sew our two layers together. And again, I'm following that basted seam line that we marked. My zipper is folded the way it will be worn. It is not folded open. This will all get finished with the Petersham because that will act as a facing here. All right. So I am not going to sew over the zipper right now. I'm going to start just inside the zipper. So my zipper is right here. I'm going to start just inside the zipper to sew these two together. We will sew over that zipper when we attach our Petersham. Helps to have the back stitch on. Okay. So there we go. So our skirt, and it's gonna look real wonky here at the top, because again, our seam allowances are not uniform, but now we have our skirt and our lining attached at the waist. Now again, we've got these unfolded because I want to be able to fold those in. Let me show you. At the end, when this folds back on itself. Now the reason that this is getting tricky is because if you were sewing a lining the way a lining normally gets sewn, you would sew right sides together. So the lining would be on the other side and then it would get flipped to the inside, because typically there would be a facing sewn at the top of the lining and then a waistband like at the top of the skirt. But we are doing this differently because we're putting our Petersham waist facing in, which is why I'm having to really think about this. Okay, so basically, there we go. Yeah, so basically you want this to be able to fold back so that you can fold your lining back and then hand stitch it to the zipper there. But we're gonna have a Petersham facing at the top that's gonna finish all of this off. Okay, sorry, that got really confusing. Once again, thinking on the fly. All right, but the rest of your waistband should be attached and that's gonna be good. Now what we wanna do is we don't want this much excess above the stitching line, because we do have a curve here at the waistband and it needs to be able to sit flushed against the body. This is way too much fabric at the top. And the Petersham ribbon I'm using is 7/8 of an inch wide, so this would be it would hang out, you know, once it got folded, once the Petersham ribbon was sewn and it was folded down, you would see that it would hang out from below the Petersham. So you're gonna wanna go and just measure from your stitch line up about, 5/8 probably. That would be a nice number, because then you would have a nice overlap of the 7/8. You'd have a 1/4 of an inch above the, right? Yes, a 1/4 of an inch more of the Petersham. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna measure up 5/8 of an inch from the stitching line all the way around, and then I'm gonna cut it off. Well, I'm gonna cut it off with my serger actually. So we're going to serge, we wanna serge the top of our waistband. And you can go ahead and cut off your zipper now too. I would not let the serger cut that off. That will wreck your blade. So use scissors and cut that off. And we are going to serge the top of the skirt. So cut your zipper off. Use blunt scissors. So I'm gonna do that, but first I'm gonna go around and I'm gonna measure 5/8 of an inch all the way around my skirt, so that when I'm serging, I can follow that line and I will cut off all the rest of the top here, which is what we want to do. All right, now that I've marked my line, I don't know if you can see that or not, marked my line with some chalk all the way around. Okay, before we serge anything, we are going to hand sew, or not hand, you don't have to hand sew it yet, but we're going to fold and pin our lining to our zipper tape. So basically you can kind of see in here, you should have your seam line marked with your chalk pen, or your wax paper, excuse me. We're going to just tuck that under like so, and you want it pulled back from the zipper a little bit. Again, I'm so sorry that this got so confusing with the zipper. But if you want to just go ahead and pin it to the zipper tape, we can hand sew it a little later. Keep your pins down low. You don't want to accidentally hit pins with the serger. But we can kind of do that. And then I think this is going to solve all of our issues. So make sure you're folding on that stitch line. And again, you want it pulled back a little bit from the zipper. All right, so this is what your skirt should look like. We've got it stitched, or basically basted. Disregard this chunk here. We've got our skirt stay stitched at the top. The two layers are stitched together. The zipper is turned back and I fold the lining on itself. You can hand stitch the lining to the zipper at this point if you want. I'm just gonna wait and do it all at the end just because that's the way I prefer to work. All right, so now we are gonna go to the serger. I've marked 5/8 of an inch up from my stitching line, although, yeah. And so I'm going to go and I'm gonna serge all the way across the top. Be very careful with the zipper teeth because they will have some issues up there at the top. So I'm gonna serge all the way across the top of the waistband, again cutting off to where I just have 5/8 of an inch above my stitching line. So I'm gonna go do that real quick and then we'll be right back. Okay folks, this is what your skirt should look like at this point. You've got the lining attached, wrong sides together to the top of the skirt. You have your seam allowances out of the way and you've folded, you know, your lining seam allowances over, you know, nice and finished, and either pinned or sewn. Make sure those pins don't get in the way of the serger. Then we've serged and trimmed it down so that there's 5/8 of an inch now at the top of the waistband, 5/8 from the stitch line here. Okay, it's time for a Petersham waistband. I feel like this got a lot more complicated than it needed to, but we're in this together. Okay, I'm going to take you over to the cutting board first because I'm going to show you how I cut my Petersham, and then we're going to mold it with steam before we sew it into the skirt. All right, so let's go do that. All right, guys, so I've got my pattern pieces here. These are the original pattern pieces, and I've got my seam allowances marked per normal. Now, because we've been messing around with this skirt, there's a chance that the waistband has grown just a little bit, and we do not want that. So we're not just going to measure off of our current waistband of our skirt. We are going to cut our Petersham ribbon based on the pattern, basically. So if we need to ease a little bit of that skirt back in, we can. So what I'm going to do is both of these pieces are cut on the fold, so we just need to keep in mind seam allowances, although we do want a little bit of excess here. Also keep in mind this is half of a skirt, the front and the back, so you'll have to double it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave, I don't know, about 5/8, whatever. Yeah, 5/8 is probably enough. And I'm just gonna march my ribbon along the seam line till I get to the fold, right there. And then we're gonna pick it up right there. Now remember, when we get to our dart, sorry, trying to film this. There we go. When we get to our dart, which is that line right there, we're gonna stop, pick it up, move it to the other dart leg, and then continue walking it, but we're gonna stop on this side at the seam line. Okay? So that is half the skirt. So we're just going to double it. So there's half the skirt, double it, and then I'm gonna cut it off, and that's how I get the length of the Petersham that I need. Okay? So I'm gonna do that real quick and cut it to get the length, and then we're gonna go to the iron and shape it. All right, now I've talked before with Petersham ribbon, sorry, it's kind of dark over in this area, but the Petersham ribbon is different from grosgrain, although a lot of times Petersham, they're linked together, because it's got little scallops on each side of the ribbon. That allows us to mold it so that we can make it curve, basically, which is what we want because our waist seam has some curve to it. So literally all you do, right now it's flat, this is the length that I need. You're just gonna take your iron and you're gonna start, well, you're gonna turn your steam on, and then you're gonna start adding in some gentle curve. So look, already what was once flat now has a curve. So we're gonna do this, and you're probably gonna have to do it a few times to get the amount of curve, but we're just going, so in essence, this is making this side shorter so those scallops allow it to pull in, and then it makes this side a little longer so those scallops are spreading out. So we're just going Petersham ribbon is just magical. as is steam. So we're just going to keep pressing and just do this a couple of times, because you're basically creating kind of a contoured waistband, which, as we all know, helps hug the body a little bit better. I mean, look how much curve I'm getting into that ribbon. So then you can take your skirt and kind of put it into the skirt as it'll be worn. This is not the way we will sew it in, but just kind of see how it's kind of following that line. If you feel like you need, you know, match it up to the seam line here, but feel like if you need a little bit more curve, because that's the way that this will be inside the skirt, which honestly, I think this is looking pretty good. Yeah, I think we're pretty good. And I don't think our skirt got stretched out too bad, which is fantastic. Okay, now this is where it gets a little counterintuitive. So now we have our waistband, and it's just like, you know, a contoured waistband, you know, on a pair of pants. So you've got your shorter curve and your longer curve. I've just thrown that onto the floor. All right, we're going to take our skirt right side out. Be careful if you've not hand sewn that lining to the zipper tape yet, because you'll get poked. All right, so this is where it gets a little counterintuitive. We are going to sew, we're basically top stitching the Petersham onto the skirt. So, when everything is said and done, and this is folded in on itself, you want the smaller side to be at the top and the longer side to be at the bottom. So, we're going to sew this way. Our shorter side is going to be top stitched to our seam line. So you're going to have a lot of rippling. So basically, when you are sewing this, you want a lot of rippling at the top. So the longer edge is up and the shorter edge, we're going to line up, and you're going to want to have, you know, a little bit extending past here, because that is going to get sewn around so that when we go down, everything has a nice finish on the inside. So you're going to want to wrap your whatever seam allowance you left, like I think I left about 3/4 of an inch. You want some pins. So now I'm going to again, I'm just going to cover, I've still got my basting stitches in for my waist seam, but I also have the sewn waist seam now too. Actually, I could go ahead and pull those basting threads out. It just depends. I'm going to leave mine because I can see them a little better than I can see my stitching line, but if you can see your stitching line fine, you can go ahead and pull those basting stitches out now. But I'm going to pin, and again, I have wrapped, so I have just taken this and just wrapped it around. Make sure your pins, if you've not sewn this down, are out of the way. You don't want to accidentally hit those with your sewing machine. And I'm just going to pin the edge of this Petersham just so it covers that stitching line. And we're going to go all the way around the skirt. And we're just going to pin that in place. Again, we want the edge of that Petersham just covering the stitch line. So you'll see, as I'm pinning, you see how it's getting really wavy? God, that's really dark, I'm sorry. See how it's getting really wavy up here at the top? That's what you want, because the shorter edge is here at the waist seam. Okay, so when everything is pinned, and you may have to kind of, you could mark with like some chalk where your side seams are and stuff when you're cutting your Petersham. I didn't. So you may have to go back and forth a little bit and make sure everything's eased in appropriately so you don't have, so that it all fits evenly inside the skirt, because it is curved. But once you have everything pinned, and again, you should have about 1/4 of an inch of Petersham past your serge line. That's a good way to check, make sure everything looks good there as well. But I am now going to go to the machine, and I am going to start right here at this edge, and I'm going to sew really close to the edge of this Petersham. And again, I have tucked this around, so I'm going to sew really close to this Petersham all the way around, following my pins and going nice and slow, but everything should fit in there well. And then I will come back and show you how we finish this off, which is, it's actually super simple. But yeah, so we're going to sew that first, then we're actually going to clip into the seam allowance, which is why we serged this edge, because it's going to help keep this from fraying. But I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. So let's top stitch this down real quick, and then I'll come back and explain the next step. All right. So as you can see, I have top stitched this Petersham to the top of the skirt. It's a lot wavier on top than it is at the bottom because of that shaping that we put in. And then on the back side, you should have about 1/4 of an inch sticking up above. Now, what we're gonna do so that everything lies really nice, and the reason that we serged the top of our skirt, and this is a Susan Calgie thing. This is a Susan Calgie trick that I picked up in one of her classes. We're gonna go and we're literally going to clip into this waistband. We're not cutting the Petersham, we're only cutting the seam allowance at the top of the waistband. And I'm clipping about every, I don't know, 3. I don't have a huge curve here because this sits below the natural waist. So depending on how much of a curve you have, clips will be closer. But I'm sewing clipping about 3/4 of an inch to an inch. And I'm gonna go all the way around the skirt. Okay, so now I've clipped all the way around just the waist seam, because when we turn this under, I want that to be able to splay and hold the shape that we've pressed into our Petersham. So now I am, whoops, that got a little long. I'm gonna go back and I'm going to press this Petersham, favoring it to the inside of the skirt. So I'm gonna do that now. A lot of people wanted to see my iron in action. So here it is. There's a little button right here that I hit that makes it steam. I love being in control of my steam. Okay, so again, these pins that are here that have pinned the lining into place around the zipper are glass heads, so I don't have to worry about melting them, but be careful if they are not glass, if yours are not. So now I'm actually going to turn this right side out so that I can work on the inside. So now I'm just gonna, on my hand, because that's gonna help you mold it real nice, I'm just gonna go and press this waist. You can even go in and pin it now if you'd like. And when you get to your ends here, sorry that is super dark, where you have folded them under, when you fold those back, you want to make sure that they kind of come inside, the teeth just a little bit, because you don't want your zipper to get caught up on the Petersham. So I'm actually going to just move this pin. Tuck that under just so everything is nice and neat. This is one of the pluses though of hand sewing is that you'll be able to control and kind of tuck things out of the way as you go. So I'm just gonna pin that down. It's a lot of bulk, easier said than done. So there we go. So this is gonna get slip stitched to the zipper tape right up here, and then again, you know, the lining will get slip stitched to the zipper tape going all the way down. And there you have it. That is a waistband facing. It is installed. Now, Susan Calgie just goes in and tacks this facing down at the seam lines and at the darts. So she does like a little X stitch so that the rest of this is all free floating. Now, of course, you would stitch it down to the zipper tape here. I think the reasoning is that it creates a little bit more movement. So it allows the skirt, you know, you don't have any weird pulling. So it's up to you what you want to do. I can also, when I show you how to do the fell stitch for enclosing the rest of the skirt, you could definitely do that up here. You could even catch stitch it down if you wanted to, if you did really nice, neat little bitty ones, you know, because you'll be able to, well, you'll be able to see it, no one else will. But yeah, really all we need to do is the hook and eye here at the top. And then finish our hem. We're getting really close, folks. All right, so next step is going to be to finish off everything but the hem. All right, so now I have everything pinned. My lining, we still have not trimmed that, and that's fine. We're gonna leave the hem for right now, but I have pinned my seam allowances to my slit and, you know, favoring the fashion fabric just a little bit here. This is the top of my slit. Now you may think that this is a vulnerable area here because, you know, it's just back stitched. We are going to fix that here in just a little bit at the end when we're doing our finishing. But for now, I want you to use a fell stitch, and we're gonna sew our lining all the way, well actually I'm gonna start at the top, go down, and then I'll start at the top and go down here. Now you can see where my hem comes up. I have, you know, kind of folded it in at an angle so that we don't have any raw edges showing. And we are going to sew this somewhat, I don't know, about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch away from the bottom of the fashion fabric. We are going to build in a jump pleat, but it will get shorter, you know, as we go. But we do want it 1-to-1 up until about, I don't know, maybe 1/2 inch. Stop about 1/2 inch from the bottom here. So I'm going to do that down here. And then I'm also going to use a fell stitch to sew my lining to my zipper. So here I have it pinned all the way up. And again, I'm going to sew my Petersham facing down up here at the top of the zipper as well. At this point, so we'll sew that. And then at this point, you can either use that same stitch to sew your Petersham ribbon down to your lining. And you could go through the lining and into the underlining. Just have a hand back here to make sure you don't go all the way through the skirt. But you could, or you could top stitch it, I guess, if you wanted, if you wanted that detail. But you can do that, or you can do the Susan Calgie way and just do kind of an X at all of the major seam allowances, you know, the side seam and the darts. I think I'm going to stitch mine all the way down, mostly because I just have the back darts. Like, I just don't know that that's a large span across the whole front of the skirt to not have anything down. Now, her argument is that when you are wearing the skirt, the tension keeps it all tucked in nice and neat. I don't know. Maybe I'll just put like a couple of X's just through the lining to tack down the front in a couple of places, like where darts would be if darts were in the skirt. I may do that. Yeah, I think I might do that. So I'm going to go the Susan Calgie way. But if you want this completely enclosed, you can definitely stitch that down if you want. So that's what we're going to do. So let me zoom in really well, and I'm going to show you what the fell stitch is, and then you're going to go fell stitch your slit and your zipper, and then, you know, secure your Petersham whichever way you want. So let me zoom in and I'll show you how to do the fell stitch. Okay, so I'm starting at the top of my slit here. Again, I just unthreaded my needle. I'm going to be using red thread on this, obviously. You will want to use a matching thread because then you really can't see your stitch at all. But I'm going to use red just so you can see. So we're going to start here at the top of the slit. Let me stay in frame. And I'm going to take just a bite here, almost at the top of the slit, so I can bury my my tail or my knot, which again, and technically in couture sewing you never use knots, but all right. So now, once we've buried, oh, this is hard, trying to show you and stay in focus. Here we go. All right, so the idea is that we're gonna come up into the fold of the silk. Stay in frame. Okay, can we see that? So I've just come up through the fold in the silk. Now I'm gonna go down, straight down into the fashion fabric, and then slide my needle through the fashion fabric and come out, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of it. It should be 1/4 of an inch for a nice fell stitch. Back up into, stay in frame, back up into the skirt, or into the lining. So then we go straight down into the fold of the fabric, and you're going to come up. So you're traveling into the fold of the fashion fabric. And it leaves, hopefully you can hardly see them, these tiny little pinprick of a stitch. It's a super secure stitch though. Hold on, just getting reorientated here. So hopefully you guys can see that. I'm looking in the viewfinder, but I sometimes I can't tell what you can see until I'm editing. So then I'm coming out about 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch. Go straight down so the stitch that you see is just a little prick going from the lining to the fashion fabric. And actually it's a very soothing stitch as well, just like the catch stitch. And so you're just going to work your way down one side of the slit, and then you'll come back up to the top and go the other side as well, and then do the same stitch to your zipper. And hopefully this, you can see that. And I'll come back and show you what it looks like when it's all finished. All right, so you should have your slit flat felled down. I don't know if you can see that or not. Also, your zipper. And then I'm doing these X's. I've got, you may really have a hard time because the red is blending in with the hot pink, but I've done an X here and here on either side of the zipper. And then I've done one at the back dart here, at the other back dart, at the side seam, and then roughly where a dart would be on the front here. And I'm going to show you how I do this. Again, roughly where a dart would be on the front. So when I'm doing this, I'm going to zoom in so you can see. When I'm doing this, I'm going to come up just through the Petersham, okay? And then I'm going down and I'm going into the silk lining. I have my hand underneath here so I don't go all the way through the skirt, but I definitely want to catch that underlining. And I'm going right to left, which then creates a diagonal line right there. Can you see that? Then I come back up, right to left, up into the Petersham. Move that pin. Then again, right to left into the, I think you could do this backwards if you're a lefty. And then I'm going to go one more time, right to left up the top into the Petersham. And then I'm just going to take a little bite out of the Petersham so that I can go through my loop once, through my loop twice, pull it taut, bury the knot. I have 2 strands of thread here for this stitch. For the fell stitch, I only had 1. I had 2 for this little cross that I'm doing. And that is all that I'm tacking this Petersham waist facing down into the skirt. Look at it. Okay, so we pan back out. Now, what we need to do is we can sew a hook and eye here at the top of the skirt so that it'll be nice and secure. And then we're going to sew, you know, a hook and bar, which is a little smaller. We're going to hand sew a bar right here at the top of the slit, and that is going to reinforce that seam so that it does not rip any further up. So I'm going to go get those real quick, and we're going to sew those in. Alright, so these are the pieces that I will be using. I've got kind of a heavier duty skirt or pant hook and eye. There's the hook part. Come on, focus. There we go. There's the hook, and there's its eye. And then I have a daintier bar, you know, the hook and bar that you would put like into the back of a dress or something. That is the one that I'm going to use. And I'm just going to sew it in place with double thread. Actually, probably what I'll do is do quadruple thread, the same way I do my buttons, just because you have to go through it less times. But I'm just going to sew this at the top of this slit, and I'm not going to sew it all the way through the skirt. I'm going to have my hand under here so I don't go all the way through the top of the skirt. And I'm going to sew that there, and then I'm going to sew my hook and bar up here to the top of the skirt, and then I will come back and we're going to talk about finishing this hem. We are almost done, guys. All right, I'm getting ready to lose battery. So I've got my skirt pretty much done. We've got the hook and eye at the top. We've got the little, I used red thread, so you've got the little, bar there at the slit. So now you're gonna see that our hem is like way too long, which is fine. I'm actually gonna go back and I'm just gonna cut right there at the original turn-up hem of the skirt. So I'm going to cut it all the way around, because then once that's cut, we're actually going to scooch it up, sew it raw, you know, raw edges together up here, and then we will have a jump pleat because it will dangle down but not too far. So that's going to be the next step, is to go and trim right at your folded up finished hem allowance line. So I'm going to do that, and then I will show you how we're going to sew this in. Okay guys, we are at the end. This is so exciting. Okay, so I've pinned the hem, and I want to show you what I've done, but I want to show you why I'm doing it. So I went ahead and I trimmed, I'm going to unpin some of these. I trimmed the hem at the line that was where we needed to fold up the body of the skirt. So we had marked that with our wax paper. So I just cut the skirt off at that point. It's a rough cut, but you know, it's fine. Now what I've done, we want this excess. We want this basically jump pleat. So when this is sewn, and see I've got my pins in here, all of this will come down over it a little more gracefully. So we'll have movement here in the skirt when we are sitting, and it won't pull the fashion fabric, which is exactly what we want. So what I've done is basically just take the raw edge and fold it up roughly about 5/8 of an inch. And we're going to match the raw edge of the lining to the raw edge of the skirt that we have already cut stitched in. Now, a little tip, so we've got the center line marked in our on our lining and on our underlining, so it's super easy reference point to match those up. And so just raw edge to raw edge, so we have that folded under, and then you're just going to pin in place. And again, we're going to do this all across, and pull some of that back up now, all across the bottom of the skirt, and I've pinned all the way around the bottom. We're not going to do any pressing until the very end, because we'll pull this excess down and then press a crease, which basically creates, see all that extra that will come down, and that will fold down over this, and then we'll press in the jump pleat. Now I want to address the side, because as you will see, it tapers down to much closer to about 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch down here at the slit. This is the slit. So you're going to tuck under the excess, because remember we hand sewed this slit down, the lining to the fashion fabric here at the slit, and just kind of pull it taut, and it will kind of lay like it wants, and so eventually that line will get up here. So you will have less of a jump pleat at the split, which is fine, but here, you know, in the center of the skirt where you need it, it will have the excess that you need. A lot of coat linings do this, so basically you're just starting, and then you're just going to kind of arbitrarily move that up. So that is all pinned in place. So now we are just going to do a hand sewing stitch to sew the entire hem in place. And I've got my needle threaded with and knotted with a single strand here. And we're just going to do basically a slip stitch. Here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so maybe you can see a little bit better. Okay. We're going to do a slip stitch. So we're going to bury our knot kind of under this corner here. Get that out of the way. So basically all we're doing is going in to the fold that we've created there. You're going to slide your needle along there, and then you're going to take a little bite out of the fashion fabric below. And then again, I'm sure you guys, it's like, sometimes it's called a ladder stitch, I think. But this stitch has a lot more movement than the flat felled stitch. So it's just a little better for the hem, so then things don't pull funny. And I am going about 3/8 of an inch. I'm traveling about 3/8 of an inch through the fold of the lining. And then coming out and taking a bite of the fashion fabric. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way around the hem of the skirt doing this stitch, and then I will come back once my pins are removed, and we'll pull the lining down to, you know, pull all the excess down that's here. Sorry, back out. Pull all this excess back down, and then we'll press it in place, and then we'll be finished. We almost have a couture skirt, couture-ish skirt. I'll be back. Okay guys, the skirt is finished. So now if you peek up, you know, you see that there's a jump pleat there. So this is where we did our sewing, right along there. And then once you've pushed all of the excess lining down, I mean, I still have a pretty good amount, so you don't have to worry about it peeking out, but then it also shouldn't pull on the skirt. So there we go. We have a couture skirt. We've got our, I have a little bit of excess here, pulling down. I'm not even worried about that. That just gives a little extra wiggle room. I've sewn my little bar here, for my bar and tack. I've got my, invisible zipper that's in there and all sewn in. We've got the Petersham waistband. Yeah, and from the right side, there you go. There's my side slit. And there is a couture pencil skirt. So now I'm going to flip to some pictures of me wearing it. And yeah, that's it for this sew along. Thank you for joining me. Bye.